Great question. That's a little more of it all. Oh, yeah.
Good afternoon. I'd ask that you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you want to remain standing, we're going to go ahead and recite the four-way test. It is on the table there, and I'd ask that you recite that with me. Of the things we think, say, or do, first, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you. Now I'd ask Matt Paulson to come forward for the invocation.
Good afternoon. Since we are talking about mentoring today, I wanted to read a passage from 1 Timothy about a mentor in the Bible. Many of you know Paul mentored Timothy, and I wanted to read a few words that Paul wrote to Timothy. For everything God created is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is to be received with thanksgiving, because it is consecrated by the word of God and prayer. If you point these things out to brothers and sisters, you will be a good minister of Christ Jesus, nourished on the truths of the faith and the good teaching that you have followed. Have nothing to do with godless myths or old wives' tales. Rather, train yourself to be godly. For physical training is of some value, but godliness has value for all things, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. This is a trustworthy saying that deserves full acceptance. That is why we labor and strive, because we have put our hope in the living God, who is the Savior of all people, especially those who believe. Command and teach these things. Don't let anyone look down upon you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in conduct, in love, in faith, and purity. Until I come, devote yourself to the public reading of Scripture, to preaching and teaching. Do not neglect your gift, which has been given to you through prophecy, when the body of elders have laid their hands on you. Be diligent with these matters, give yourself wholly to them, so that everyone may see your progress. Watch your life and your doctrine closely. Preserve them, because if you do, you will save both yourself and your hearers. Thank you. Amen.
Thank you, Matt, and welcome Rotarians and guests. You may be wondering, where is President Cindy Peterson? I think she maybe wishes she had been in Frisco yesterday, or it was somewhere. She's actually under the weather, so you have myself. For those of you who I have not met, I am Tony Knorr, current past president, and grateful for the opportunity to be with you today. I do want to say congratulations to Jackrabbit Nation and to all of South Dakota. Great day for the state, and one that will be remembered for years to come. We're going to go ahead and have our guests rise right now. I want to just recognize our guests. If you could have all guests rise, I want to thank guests for coming, and those that invited them, I want to thank them for inviting them. All right. January also brings junior Rotarians. We have 2 junior Rotarians this month. I know Jack is here. Jack Heinrichs, if you could stand, from Washington. And Avalon Brenner, are you with us today? We will catch up with her next week. But great to have you here today, Jack. One of many things that we really enjoy here at Downtown Rotary is bringing new members into our club. And we have an opportunity today to recognize and welcome 3 new members. We have 3 inductions. And we're going to go ahead and first bring up Tony Burke and our newest Rotarian, Rabbi Mendel.
Thanks, Past President Tony and fellow Rotarians. I'm pleased to bring to you today Rabbi Mendel Alperowitz. And I met in 2017, soon after he and his wife Musi and their children moved to Sioux Falls from New York. During our visit, he shared his vision to shine the light of Judaism a little brighter in South Dakota. He is doing so by traveling the state, visiting Jews in their homes and places of worship, ensuring no Jew feels alone, and publicly showing the spirit of Judaism in many ways. He became the first permanent rabbi here in South Dakota since 1979 and is the president of the Chabad Jewish Center of South Dakota. From my personal vantage point, getting to know Rabbi, he's a quiet leader and is really well spoken. He also has great questions and is very curious. He's done so much for the Jewish people in our state and has educated and informed many more South Dakotans on the beauty of the religion, truly in the spirit of service above self. Please join me in welcoming Rabbi Mendel Alperowitz to Downtown Rotary.
Thank you, Tony, for inviting me. Thank you all for having me and welcoming me here. As Tony mentioned, my wife and I moved to Sioux Falls from New York several years ago to work with the Jewish community here. It had been several decades since there had been a rabbi living in the state, and that's what brought us here. And over the last few years, I could say unequivocally that I could not have found a better place to live, to raise a young family. I couldn't be more welcomed into Sioux Falls, into the broader community. I look different. I dress a little different. I have different lifestyle behaviors. And nevertheless, I have been completely welcomed and embraced across Sioux Falls by everybody here. So thank you all for having me. Thank you for being so welcoming. Sioux Falls is a great place, and I'm glad to be here today. Thank you.
Once again, welcome. Next, I'm going to ask Kathy Thorson and Nick Brown to come forward.
Good afternoon. I have the pleasure today of introducing Nick Brown. Nick is the regional president of Central Bank, as well as one of the owners of Central. For those of you who go, who is Central Bank? About 3 years ago, MetaBank was sold to Central. Nick relocated to Sioux Falls in August of last year. I often tell him, and I look at the rabbi when I say this, he moved to God's country. I think he's starting to believe it. So please join me in welcoming Nick Brown.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for welcoming me here today. Kind of like Rabbi said, Sioux Falls has been very welcoming to both my wife, my children, and me. It is truly a great community, and we're very happy that we moved here. Yeah, since we transitioned up here, kids have been very welcomed at school. Wife has made lots of friends and been involved in the community, so it's been great to get involved here in Sioux Falls. At Central Bank, we've always been community focused and always try to be engaged in various aspects of the community. So we're really looking forward to getting more involved up here. Kathy, Keith, and the team up here do an incredible job of that, and we're just looking to get more and more involved. Joining Downtown Rotary is truly an honor, and I hope I can get back to this amazing city that has been very welcoming so far. I just want to reiterate that you guys really do have a special community. Nowhere else in the world would you be welcome like you are in this town, as Rabbi said. So truly looking forward to getting involved here, and I thank you all for including me in Rotary.
Nick, welcome to Sioux Falls. Welcome to Downtown Rotary. It's great to have two new residents of Sioux Falls as our first two members inducted today, and grateful to have you as part of this. Next, we're going to have Matt Paulson, who has invited a number of new Rotarians over the last year or two. Introduce Sarah Lum.
Thank you, Tony and fellow Rotarians. It is my pleasure to introduce you today to Sarah Lum. She is currently the Vice President of Startup Sioux Falls. So she and Brienne will be spending the next few weeks working like crazy to get our new space ready. Prior to that, Sarah was a founding faculty member at the Department of Architecture at SDSU. She was an architect at JLG, where she worked on a lot of projects that many of you may be familiar with, including the Gage Brothers Concrete Plant, the DSU Cyber Labs, and the Minnehaha County Jail expansion. Sarah has 2 master's degrees. She's in a rare club there. She has finished an MBA from USD, and she also has a master's of architecture from Rice University. She's a high school basketball referee in her free time. In college, she walked on to a D1 basketball team, so she's a pretty impressive athlete. She's a volunteer mentor with MB, and she has been a long time volunteer for kind of the design and the arts to different organizations. She's been married to her husband, Michael, for 10 years. They have a dog named Henry. And Sarah's a great person and will be a great addition to our club. So please welcome Sarah.
Thanks so much, Matt. It's really fitting to be inducted today during Mentoring Month and while we're talking about mentorship, because mentorship has been such a big part of my journey. Matt started as a board member, and then he's turned into a mentor and a friend of mine. And I'm really grateful to have my boss here today. Many people search a lifetime to have a working relationship like we have, and I'm really grateful for that. Startup Sioux Falls, I have to do a pitch. If you haven't heard of Startup Sioux Falls, we help people start businesses in the Sioux Falls region. We see ourselves as the connectors. So even we tell people to start with Startup Sioux Falls, because even if we can't help you, we know someone who can. And if you haven't heard, we're moving. And many of the partners and supporters, both individuals and organizations, are in this room. So there's more announcements that will be coming out here shortly, but we're just really grateful to all of you. We're moving in furniture as we speak, so it's been pretty exciting. I grew up in the area, and I didn't know if I would return, but my husband and I, after almost 10 years away, we moved back to Sioux Falls in 2016. And besides marrying him, moving back to Sioux Falls was the best decision I've ever made. It's a special place, thanks in part to many of the people in this room. And I just look forward to playing a very small part in continuing the legacy we've built in Sioux Falls for decades to come. Thank you so much.
Welcome, Sarah. Great to have you back in Sioux Falls in 2016 and part of downtown Rotary going forward. Now we're going to turn our attention to what's been a focus for us as a club over the last number of years, and that is mentoring. It's had an impact in all of our lives in one way or another, whether as a mentee or mentor, and we're going to shine a light on that today. And to do that, we have our mayor here, who has been a champion for this during his first administration and our first 4 years, and I know the second 4 years he's going to continue that. So with that, I would ask Mayor Paul TenHaken to come forward, and he's got a proclamation to read today.
Thanks, Tony. I thought we were talking about snow removal today. I had the wrong. You got complaints? It's Mark Cotter's his name. There's a lot of armchair plow drivers out there right now, believe me. A lot of mentors. No, 3 years ago we started an initiative called the Sioux 52 Initiative in January of 2020. Right before the world kind of fell apart. And the rationale behind lifting this up was I'd been in office for, at that point it was almost 2 years, and saw that a lot of the challenges in our community are not, honestly, they're not solved by government programs, they're solved by relationships. Whether you look at crime challenges, or whether you look at some truancy issues in schools, or whether you look at the increasing diverse population of our community, and how do we address that and make sure everyone feels welcome here. And the idea of the Sioux 52 mentorship program was formed. And Sioux 52 just meaning there's 52 weeks in a year. If you can give an hour a week at least, you can have a real impact on someone. And I think what's happened over the last 3 years, not due in small part to this club, is just that there's a lot more people talking about mentorship. And it's a discussion that's happening a lot more than it ever has before. And I wanted to just share a couple examples, three if I'm thinking of well, I probably have more, but the first is in today's Argus Leader, there's 2 articles about crime and parolees and absconders. And it's no secret that we have more people in our community, and what's come with that is we have had an increase in crime. And I want you to read those articles if you can. They're behind a paywall, so if you need me, I can cut and paste and send it to you if you don't have a, or you should subscribe, support local journalism. But the theme, they talk to 2 parolees in there, and they talk about how the community just doesn't want to take a chance on them. And my remarks come across a little harsh in the article because a lot of the crime we're seeing in Sioux Falls is by people on parole, people that we've arrested multiple times, and they get paroled early or they get put back into our community and they reoffend. And some of them are just going to be chronic reoffenders. I don't have these rose-colored glasses on that everybody is salvageable, but there are a lot of people who just need help. They need a job. They need a mentor. They need help with housing, big ones housing. And they need someone to walk alongside them and say, how can I help you not get back into that path that I know you don't want to be on, but you don't have any other choice. So you need to read that article and see the quotes from those 2 guys. Second thing, an example of mentoring is in 2019, there was a car accident in Sioux Falls, and this young man was in a car accident here in Sioux Falls, and he ended up in the ICU. And it was a pretty visible story in Sioux Falls, and I didn't know what to do. I felt really bad for this family, so I actually just went up to Avera, to their ICU, and I prayed with this family. It was an immigrant family. I just sat down with them and prayed with them because I felt so bad for what had happened to their son. We didn't know if he was going to live. And he did live, and he's turned into a really great young man, and he's a senior now. And he sent me a message a couple weeks ago, and he said, hey, my guy, that's how seniors talk to the mayor. Hope all has been well lately. I just was wondering how you are so able to facilitate your faith with connecting with people, pursuing goals, being a father, a role model, and as well as being able to face the trials of the world with the right response. This is a senior in high school asked me this question. He says, don't want to sound like a TV reporter, but I just am seeking truth and a word of guidance. And of course, that was through Instagram because that's how they communicate. So that was a DM. So I'm like, man, what do I do with that? So I just reached out to him and said, hey, I got Monday off. Let's go out to Famous Dave's and I'll buy you lunch and we'll talk. And we did that, and we had a great 90-minute conversation, and this kid's going places. I submitted a letter of recommendation for him to hopefully get into Harvard, but if not, he's got other aspirations too. And the point of that story is that mentorship doesn't always take the form of formal programs, right? Mentorship is all the people in this room who have all kinds of folks who would love some of your time. There's so much firepower in this room and so much knowledge in this room that I just encourage you to send the elevator back down, as I like to say. And when you get a note like this, or someone says, hey, do you have time for coffee? And you're like, no, I don't. I'm important. I don't have time for coffee. Take the time for coffee because I think it could be very impactful. And then the third story is a lot of relationships don't even know, both by the mentor and the mentee, that they exist. And there's even a couple in this room. I'm having a beer with Dave Rosenboom at 4 o'clock today. 5? Is it 5? Oh, 5, Dana. 5 o'clock. But when I first decided to run for mayor, I reached out to 2 people that I've considered mentors, Michelle LaValle and Dave Rosenboom, and they co-chaired my campaign. And I don't think they even know the impact that you guys putting your hands up and say, yeah, I'll do that, which didn't involve a lot, just that you were willing to say, yeah, I believe in you, and I'll do that. And that meant a lot to me. And so a lot of our relationships, you don't even know that you're maybe in a mentor-mentee relationship with someone. And so It's cool that this club invests in mentorships and continues to push this. I appreciate it. I know the city appreciates it. I'm going to read a proclamation, and then we'll continue on with our program. It goes like this. Whereas January 2023 has been proclaimed National Mentoring Month by President Biden and marks the 3rd anniversary of the Sioux 52 Mentoring Initiative, a regional mentoring effort led by Mayor Paul TenHaken and the Rotary Club of downtown Sioux Falls that seeks to create a significant long-term commitment to mentoring in our city. Whereas since the launch of Sioux 52, awareness of the importance of mentoring throughout the area has been elevated significantly. Mentors, business partners, and mentor programs have been united in the goal to increase mentorship with assistance from the 211 Helpline Center as a connection point. Whereas the city of Sioux Falls, we honor volunteer mentors who support mentees by showing up for them and demonstrating their commitment to helping them thrive. Whereas the need for mentoring in our region continues to grow and the desire is strong to make Sioux Falls known as, quote, a community of mentors. Whereas quality mentoring promotes strong communities, healthy relationships and communication, positive self-esteem, emotional well-being, and personal growth. And whereas National Mentoring Month is the time of the year to celebrate, elevate, and encourage mentoring across the Sioux Falls region and recruit caring mentors in Sioux Falls. Now, therefore, I, Paul TenHaken, Mayor of the City of Sioux Falls, do hereby proclaim January 2023 as Sioux 52 Mentoring Initiative Month in our city. So thank you to this club for all the work you do to continue to connect people in our community to live their best lives in Sioux Falls. Thank you.
Mayor, thank you for being here today and encouraging us. We want to continue to encourage you and the team at the city for the work that you do to help create the environment that we get to call home. Now we're going to turn attention to our program, and I'm going to invite actually a mentor of mine, Dana Dykhouse, as well as Jim Woster and Eric Erickson to the front. And we're going to have a conversation about mentoring, what impact that had in the lives of our panelists. And I look forward to hearing that. We're going to have a little time for question and answer, and then we're going to get back to Sioux 52 and this club's impact that it has already had and that it can have when it comes to partnering with the city, partnering with the Helpline Center. So we'll wrap up our program, but at the moment, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Eric Erickson for a conversation on mentoring. Thanks.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks again, Mayor, for that proclamation. And first wanted to start by thanking Tony Burke for his leadership and Michelle before him and all of the presidents of this club, Jesse, I see you, that found it important that we find a one relevant it as this organization to do something more than just pat ourselves on the back, to try to take what we know, what we've learned, what we've earned from others, and pass it on to this community to make the community better. And not just pat our bottom line. So thank you for that leadership, and I know that that is the reason that many of you have become Rotarians, is because you understand the need to give back to this community. We've replaced the normal banner that's up here with a banner that does talk about building relationships or building a better community one relationship at a time. So whatever you're left with after this conversation today, just that's what we're asking of you. This is why we brought three guys who are going to create a big audience both here and online, so you can hear the message that if this is your resolution for this year and for the rest of your life, just know that there's probably an hour in a week that you could give up for the benefit of others. There's plenty out there. So I feel a little bit like David Letterman today with his, my next guest needs no introduction. But when they give me one opportunity to say what the program is going to be at Rotary one time a year, I immediately thought of these two gentlemen. So, and like the mayor said, even if they don't know it, they've been mentors, if not just good role models for me and how they conduct themselves. So I will do a formal introduction, however. So first, Dana J. Dykhouse, South Dakota Hall of Fame, 2011, CEO of Premier Bank. He's been with Premier now for 28 years. Dana gives his time to several organizations, encourages everyone at Premier to do the same. It might be known as the Premier Way. He's currently the chairman of the board of, he's on the board of too many to mention, but I wanted to mention some that have something to do with helping young folks in particular. Chairman for the Build Dakota Scholarship Fund, South Dakota Technical Education Board. He also serves on the board for Junior Achievement. He was a champion behind the South Dakota's first public-private partnership for a needs-based college scholarship known as the Freedom Scholarship. Dana received his degree in animal science, which makes perfect sense to all of us here, from a little university on the prairie called South Dakota State University. And we were glad to have him back because I know you were probably in Texas yesterday. Dana's been married to LaDawn for how long now?
42 years.
All right. And they have 2 children, 5 grandchildren. So please welcome Dana Dykhouse. Jim Woster is too humble to hear all these words that I'm going to say about him. So
Go ahead.
South Dakota Hall of Fame inductee in 2001. He worked for the Sioux Falls Stockyards for 43 years. He's the founder of the Stockyard Experience in Sioux Falls. He was a fixture on TV and radio for many years, even for me in Southwest Minnesota. I had nothing to do with ag, but I always knew it was time to stop watching cartoons when the Stockyard Report was on TV. But for many years, ag producers in South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa would stop what they were doing and listen to the latest stock report from Jim Woster. He stayed active in agriculture and all over after the stockyards closed in 2009, writing a weekly column for the Tri-State Neighbor, serving on the board of the South Dakota Hall of Fame, and regularly volunteering as a Goodwill ambassador at Avera McKinnon. He's also known as Mr. Jackrabbit, the door opener at SDSU, helping them reach their fundraising goals. And Jim has probably emceed more events than any of us have attended in our lives. 1962 animal science grad from South Dakota State University. Been married to Penny for, is it 56? 56 years. They have 3 children. Please welcome Jim Woster. So, you've heard from these gentlemen many times, I'm sure, and know a lot about them. I want to make sure that we give a lot of time for questions and answers. And probably you've encountered them in some way in your walk of life, whether it's in business or personal. So please, as you're sitting here over the next 10 minutes or so, think of things that you would like to ask these gentlemen. And if it relates to mentorship, great. If it doesn't, whatever. As long as it reflects the spirit of volunteerism and giving of themselves to just elevate that whole theme today. So, Dana, I think we'll start with you. When you and I were talking a bit last week, you mentioned you wanted to be sure to mention the 3 pillars. And specifically as it relates to business in this state. So maybe we can just start with that.
Yeah, well, the Bison had just tied it up 7-7, and we had 3rd and 14, and there was no pressure on the quarterback. He hit. Well, no,
that's all right. Thank you.
I just can't get it on my mind. I'm sorry. But no, I think that the thing about the mentorship is that it's really important that we mentor, and then probably COVID taught us this, as the mayor said, the connections that we have to our customers, to our coworkers, and to the community. And you can't go home and do that. I think we all got sent home, and we realized that if you're going to mentor, if you're going to influence, if you're going to be successful at anything, you have to have those 3 connections. It's so important. And just as the mayor said, it's not a formalized mentorship. It's just being there for people, listening to them, answering questions, and being able to relate to what's going on. I think that's the thing that those 2 years away taught us. And I hope we all learned that lesson.
Yeah, thank you. And Jim, something that you and I talked about was whether or not you knew it. You have been a mentor to me, mostly because it doesn't have to be the annual banquet of this SDSU Foundation for Jim to want to MC. If you ask him like, hey, 8 of us are getting together and we're going to have a silent auction for something, he's willing. If he's always, let me check my schedule, let me check with Penny, and then I'll get back to you. So where does that come from, Jim? Why is it that you're so active and willing to give back?
I hadn't even thought about mentoring official in the position thing, and then I got to thinking, what is it about? Where does this come from? Obviously, when you grow up where I did, and in the day when the kids did all the work. With your dad, obviously, you don't even know what's going on. We had an Indian that worked for us that turned out to be my best friend. His favorite, Faye January. He's 3 years older than I was. He worked with us all summer. I've been thinking back to the people that made a difference. And Faye was a guy that I just idolized. He just from every aspect of it, we stayed good friends. I gave a eulogy here about 2 years ago. He went on to be a rancher himself and do just a great job. But the one, if I could very quickly, Nell Labadie was her name. She was an English teacher at Chamberlain High School. And when you come from where we did then to a high school, it's got 200 kids in at Chamberlain High School. And then if you're a young man that's got a little complexion problem and you're self-conscious, and well, I was having a heck of a time in that first freshman year. And about a month into this, I was doing all right in English. I called her Nell after I graduated. Miss Labadie stopped me and she got to talking, and she talked about you're doing good in English. You know, you got to understand the kids like you. And she went into some things, and she did that for a year or so. And if there's one person that made a difference, and you're so lucky to have been around, but if there's one person, it's Nell Labadie. And she was an English teacher and literature teacher. And very quickly, I'm doing a lot of markets. I'm on television all the time. I'm 42, 3 years old, and you're on in the morning and you're doing this and you're putting full of yourself. And the phone rang at dinner time. So I answered it. She said, "Jim, hi, this is Nell Labadie. Oh my Lord, so good to hear from you." And she said, "I don't know if you're going to think so when we get done." True story. You talk about a mentor and a people. She says to me, "Jim, there's no such word as irregardless." I just great when you say that. I'm 40 years old, and I've been out of high school for 25 of those, but that's a mentor. She taught me so much when I was young. She taught me, but she took the time to call and say, "Knock it off." That isn't a word that she used. So there's been but this mentorship thing. And then very quickly, I think back to probably for all 35, 40 years, probably 5 or 6 times a year, I spoke at annual awards, FFA banquets from you name the town, but what was in there. But over the last 20 years later, and I never thought about it, started having young people that I'd be at a banquet and they might introduce me and they'd say, 22 years ago, you were the speaker at Redfield when I was a senior. And I remember, and you get to thinking, you don't even know when you're making a difference in somebody's life. None of us do. And especially, who had ever thought about an official mentoring program, which is just wonderful because, boy, it's so important to help folks. And Mayor, you sure said it all. I mean, you really did. But with that, I'll just be quiet. But I think when I said a few words at Nell's funeral, and I told that story, and it just brought the house down because it was true. Well, you're not going to like what I'm going to say. Anyway, that's my Nell.
Dana, who would you consider mentors in your life? You played college football. I know you've mentioned that as credited that with some of your business success even, but mentors in your life.
I think in my life, Sioux Falls is a unique community, and we have many mentors. There's many of them out here today. Many of these gentlemen and ladies have mentored me in my life, but one I remember so well, some of you may remember him. Gary Olson was president of the local Norwest Bank, which is now Wells Fargo. This was in the early 80s, and I was working for a competitor, just a young loan officer, and Gary Olson grabbed me one day and said, "Dana, we want your help on this." It was, I think, the second Forward Sioux Falls campaign. And Gary said, "This is how we do it in Sioux Falls." And he made such an impression on me that it wasn't just how we do it, it's how we do it in Sioux Falls collectively. And that had such an impact on me because I thought, gee, here's a competitor, another bank, but he took the time to really show me how we were going to make Forward Sioux Falls successful. And so it's that type of people. Many of you remember Larry Toll in Sioux Falls. Larry was a great mentor of mine. We co-chaired a drive for the Boy Scouts when they made their move out on West Russell Street in that capital campaign. I was kind of new to it. Larry'd been through it before. And he would take the time not just to say, "Let's get this done," but here's how we're going to do it. And here's how we do it in Sioux Falls. Many of you remember Bill Barlow, who was head of the United Way here in Sioux Falls for years. Bill Barlow was the type of person when he walked into the room, you knew he was there, and he had a way about him of just saying when Bill was there, he exuded that confidence and that ability that we as a community were going to get it done. And I can't encourage all of you enough that that's something that I think we don't want to lose in the fabric of our community, is those leaders who pull young leaders aside, who pull people along with them and say, this is how we do it in Sioux Falls. This is what makes us different.
I think seeking a mentor too. I always admire folks who are like, yes, I have a mentor. I called this person and said, I respect the way you conduct yourself, and would we be able to get together? And that, I think, is something that's good for all of us to humble ourselves and say, everybody we meet knows something that we don't know. We know something they don't, they know something we do. And that could be a seventh grader that I meet with at Whittier once a week. He can kick my butt at Connect 4, at any card game we play, and also teach me how to communicate like a seventh grader. But a part of these things a lot of these things are feel-good stories. And the mayor mentions parolees, and for sure there are people who have the gifts that it takes to go face-to-face with somebody who's had a hard past and is going to have a hard future and just needs somebody to walk with them. That's not all of us, but there are people who are gifted in that way. But remember too, for every story you see about someone being put away in the state pen, there's a family that's left behind in this city and in the state as a result of that. And personally, that's where I've found my gifts to be the best used too. These kids have no idea that they're on a track that resembles their parents. And I looked face to face with a kid the other day and said, how are you not going to go to prison? And you can't do that on the first date. You have to, I known this kid for a couple of years, and he said, it's not that hard. And I'm like, thank God you say that it's not that hard. Because if we can just keep on that theme, you really have a good track ahead of you. How about the two of you know one another very well. And Jim, maybe you can go first with just your relationship with Dana and how you've learned from one another.
But obviously my connection with South Dakota State just as a volunteer, and Dana in the late 70s, 77, 6, farm kid from down by Rock Rapids, played football up there. He came to Stockyards and Busters, but I got to watching this guy play with about as hard a nose as you ever. I'm not an athlete. I couldn't, nothing. But I always enjoyed watching sports. And then when Dana took over at Premier, he seems like he was always in his office. So it got to maybe twice a month if I needed to know something or if I had a question. I knew if I called at 5:30, he'd be able to take the phone call. He made the mistake of giving me his private number. But through that, but we had many early morning phone calls and we tried to get together. But I learned so much, the very things that he talked about. You think when just that age covers up a lot of sins, and it does, but it doesn't make you any smarter. That I can tell you. And that's why people like Dana and some of the younger kids that I got to meet, FFA banquets, or kids that came down from South Dakota State on the bus to tour the Stockyards to spend the day with us. You learn a lot by just spending some time with them. But the number of times that I call this guy here just to ask a little bit of advice, and I know he's an awful lot younger. But by the way, just very quickly, the coldest and meanest football game I ever watched play up there was a game he played in against North Dakota U. I won't go into that, but it was so awful cold, and I don't know how those kids even made it. But anyway, thanks, Dana, for what you do. Appreciate it.
Well, Jim, I think Jim's been a mentor to all of us through the years. You know somebody for 40 or almost 50 years now that I've known Jim Woster, and I have never seen him say a negative word about anybody. I've never seen him say a negative word about any situation. I've never seen him disparage anything. He is the most positive, upbeat person. And I've always said, and it's true, you go across South Dakota and you meet people who know Jim Woster, and they're his friend. They want to be his friend. And I said, as a mentor, you just want to model your life like that. You want to be able to say that, I live my life like that in a positive fashion, positively impacting people throughout the state. That's something Jim Wooster's done, and that's something we should all admire.
Yeah, right on. If we could get the microphone ready, this is your opportunity here in just a couple of minutes. I want to make sure, raise your hand really high so the microphone makes it over to you. I'm not sure where to go next. There's a lot of youth-based mentoring programs, and actually Michelle Madsen is here from LSS, and there's junior achievement. We often think of youth mentoring programs. There are business-to-business type of programs that exist. And again, remember, if you have those skills, or if you're looking for somebody who has those skills, And Dana, could you go back just real quick to the Forward Sioux Falls and your experience there, and just how there's kind of a mentoring arrangement within Forward Sioux Falls?
Sure. Well, Forward Sioux Falls, I think, is one of the things in Sioux Falls that gives us the opportunity to get to know other people within the business community. And through the years of working with Forward Sioux Falls, everyone's in a different situation. Everyone has different skills, different abilities they bring to the table. And I think that's one thing with Forward Sioux Falls and the committees we set up and the calls you make on businesses. You never know what's going to go on with that business. I got to share one story, one great lesson I learned about Sioux Falls, and you could call it mentoring or not. I remember calling on one business for their contribution to Forward Sioux Falls, and they said they couldn't do it this go round, this 5-year cycle, that their business was struggling a little bit, and I was kind of disappointed. I thought they should do it. It counted toward my number, but in reality, that business person was very sincere about it. And when I made that same call 5 years later, they doubled their contribution because the business cycle had turned around for them, and they were headed the right direction. The lesson learned was always remember that you need to walk a mile in that other person's shoes to really understand it. It taught me that, and I think that's something that we learn about our community here.
Sure. All right, questions? Does somebody have the mic out here? All right. And Jim reminded me, it's probably been 8 years since you were here on this stage with Downtown Rotary?
Well, Jen and I were here when we
That's right.
presented the Stockyards Ag Experience Project.
Yes.
Can't be that long, is it? Okay.
All right. So,
Okay.
go ahead, Jesse.
Thank you for your time today. And Mayor, thank you taking us back to January 2020. I remember very well being on the stage at the pavilion with you and the excitement and the anticipation that we held for this initiative. But there are so many new Rotarians in this room since that time. Eric, what's the next best step? If somebody's thinking, you know what, this resonates with me, what's their next step?
Thank you, Jesse. At the very end, we're going to give Emily Van Gorp an opportunity to just introduce herself again to all of you. So I'll just describe the relationship again of Sioux 52. We are not a mentoring program. This is an initiative. This is to leverage everything that already exists in an organized method. So when the mayor decided that as part of his time in office, he wanted to make sure that we made the very best use of that time by getting more mentors involved at school at every level possible. Rotary was also doing that at the same time, and we found that our needs and our interests aligned very closely. So what we decided was that we would recruit businesses, because that's where all of us have the most influence, go out to an individual business and say, would you encourage a culture of mentorship within your company? And if so, here's what we're going to ask you to do. We're going to maybe ask you to give an hour a week paid to each of your employees to go out and do mentoring in the community. And if you choose to do that, you sign a pledge and you become a business partner. So you'll hear the term business partners. I think we have close to 50 now that are doing that hadn't been doing that previously. And so that's where we get the source of mentors. We already have mentoring organizations like LSS, like VOA, like Junior Achievement. Many of them already exist, and they're always looking for mentors. So what 211 does is matches up those employees within the Business Partners organization, says, hey, what are your gifts? What are you interested in? And they'll match you up with this mentoring organization and say, here's a group that needs your help, and now you have this match. What Emily will do is to continue to work with your primary point of contact within that business partner. Maybe you have somebody in HR, somebody who's going to be the primary point of contact. She'll make sure that you continue to have resources like a PowerPoint during an onboarding. She'll give you brochures. She'll give you whatever you need to make sure that that just doesn't something that's a flash in the pan and is gone after 3 months and it was a cool thing for a while. Now we forgot about it. This is going to become part of your fabric of your organization. Does that answer it? All right. Thank you. Jen.
Yesterday afternoon in the post-game interview, Coach Stiglmeyer mentioned that he learned from his dad on the farm, working hard and being a good person was really paramount. I'm curious if either or both of you have a lesson you've learned somewhere along the way, similar to what Coach mentioned, that just really guides you and that you always pass along to anyone that you're mentoring.
Well, I think that's a great question, and I've often said that Jim and I and many of you in the room had a big advantage growing up on a farm or in that atmosphere for one reason. You had responsibility for something other than yourself. If you didn't get up in the morning and do the chores, if you didn't take care of those animals you were assigned to, they didn't make it. And I think too many young people today, if we could mentor them and show them something, is teaching them to have responsibility for something other than themselves. Too many are just ingrained in themselves and their own issues, and they talk about mental health. We didn't have many mental health problems back on the farm because we were working. I mean, if I had told mom or dad I had anxiety, they'd say, well, great, do that later. It's time to feed the cattle. It's just have responsibility for something more other than yourself is one of the real keys to success in anything. If you ever heard, I think a lot of you know Frank Kurtenbach. Frank Kurtenbach, probably the greatest motivational speech I've ever heard. Frank Kurtenbach talks about feeding the chickens. That's his speech. Jim, you've heard it. You got to feed the chickens. If you don't feed the chickens, you don't get eggs. If you don't get eggs, you don't get more chickens. It's a great speech that Frank gives. Yesterday, we're walking on the stadium in Frisco, Texas. Ran into Frank, and he yells from about a block away, Dana, the chickens got fed today. I thought that was the greatest line in the world.
Jim, any thoughts on that?
Dana summed it up. It's just exactly, yeah. If you don't do the chores, you don't go to bed. I mean, that's just what that amounted to. So, yeah, thanks, Dana.
Somebody else have the mic? Oh, are anybody else, other questions? Comments, a story about an interaction with Jim Woster at some point? Mark, go ahead.
Dana, why don't you, the chickens that got fed that led to that championship yesterday, why don't you share the story of the journey that began when you and others started to push to D1?
Hey, right.
Well, I'm probably going to tell it. This goes way back, and I probably shouldn't tell this story, but I will. And it's about a guy that I truly admire. John Stegelmeyer is probably one of the people that I truly admire in life. John Stegelmeyer and I started at SDSU the same year. I was a scholarship football player along with the other guys. John Stegelmeyer was from Selby, South Dakota, kind of a dumpy, short little guy that had never played football before. And John Stegelmeyer asked Coach Gregory if he could assist with the football team, if he could be a student assistant. Well, those of you that have been around sports know that a freshman student assistant from Selby, South Dakota, to say he was the lowest level of a water and towel boy this week, it would have been a 90-10 vote against it when we did it. There were some visionaries, Peggy Miller and Fred Owen, and they knew that we need to make that move. But it was a long trek to get where we were at. I don't want to bore you with these stories, but I'll give you the example. North Dakota State made the decision to put all their eggs in the football basket. They took all their resources and put them all in the football basket, and they had a dynasty. After 4 in a row, I think that dynasty is dead, but that's my opinion. They put all their eggs. South Dakota State, the visionaries up there, Fred Owen, Peggy Miller, David Sheequin, said, no, we're going to treat all of our 350 student athletes the same. And what you saw is North Dakota State had won numerous Division II women's basketball championships. They haven't smelled a conference title in all those years. They had been competitive in other sports, and they aren't competitive in anything but football. My point of that is it takes a vision, it takes passion, and it takes a good strategic plan. And I'll put our strategic plan up against anybody's, because not only did the football program rise, but all the other sports rose and the entire university rose. and became successful. I think it's a good story. It'll be a good book someday that somebody will write.
Thank you. We want to make sure we have time for Emily. This being National Mentoring Month, and then now, according to the mayor, Sioux 52 Initiative Month in the city of Sioux Falls. Hopefully you've seen some of the marketing efforts, the billboards, some of the things that are going on TV, and maybe you've gotten a Facebook ad that you didn't know you signed up for. I want to thank Dakota News Now, Book Your Billboard, and Lawrence and Schiller for those efforts, and for the Sioux 52 Steering Committee that is really working behind the scenes to make sure that when our recruiters, led by Darren Anderson, walk into a place of business and say, we would like to challenge you to become a Sioux 52 business partner, that they've already seen or heard about it, and they are quick to say yes and contribute more mentors to the funnel that is always waiting for more mentors. So Emily, if you'd like to make your way forward. In the meantime, if you could thank these two gentlemen for joining us today.
Good job, Dana.
Over the last couple of months, we have been reaching out to our business and nonprofit partners to ask for feedback on what we can be doing better to promote this initiative, as well as how we could update some of the current processes in place. And the biggest piece of feedback we received was communication. So some businesses reached back out to us, letting us know that they signed up. They didn't really receive onboarding, and so then it kind of fell through the cracks. As well as we heard from individuals that signed up, then their nonprofit partner never contacted them, and they didn't get connected to a mentor. And so once we identified these issues, we did establish a new policy and procedure we're going to follow involving my role to ensure that those two issues don't happen again in the future. As well as I did schedule meetings with all of our nonprofit partners to discuss with them what kind of the guidelines and qualifications we have in place for them so that we can all be on the same page in terms of communication. We also ensured that they are all still actively seeking more mentors at this time. Then with promoting Sioux 52, a lot of businesses and nonprofits commented they thought it'd be helpful to have a newsletter. So we did establish a monthly newsletter that will go out to all of our partners just to keep people up to date with any new updates we have, new promotional items, anything like that. We also worked on ways to pitch Sioux 52 to the general public and increase the mentoring awareness overall. Eric touched on those a little bit. So we're partnering with Dakota News. We established social media pages. We're running billboards. We have ads on TVs, as well as we created promotional items to be able to hand out to businesses and individuals who are interested. So we do have the notepads on the tables, which are your guys' to keep, as well as we have some more items in the back for you guys to take. So we've worked really hard to do all the behind the scenes work with this initiative. And now we're ready to really start to go out and promote this initiative within the businesses. And we're excited to see where Sioux 52 can go in 2023. So please visit sioux52.org to either sign up your business, sign up yourself, or that's also where you can find my email if you have any questions and want to follow up. I do also want to thank Eric and my boss Janet, as well as all the members of the Sioux 52 Steering Committee for all of your help these past couple of months. So thank you.
Thank you for that update, Emily. And I think it's a fitting way to end a conversation about mentoring. We talk about partnerships. This is a perfect example of what makes Sioux Falls special. I was talked to earlier with all three of our new Rotarians. A partnership would not have happened if Downtown Rotary, along with the city, along with the Helpline Center, figured out a way to bring those three together. Tony Burke was a tip of the spear, along with the mayor and Janet, to bring those three together. And it's a great recipe. And that out of that was birthed Emily's position. For her to have half of her time dedicated to this, we want to continue to work to get this right. We got out of the blocks hard in January 2020 for no fault of our own. In March of 2020, things changed, but we learned a lot through that. And as our mentors on the stage shared, we learned that we're better when we're in community with each other. We're better when people are pouring into us. So I'd ask as you go out this week that you pour into others and find ways to continue to give back and make this community even more special. With that, Rotary is adjourned. We look forward to seeing you back next Monday. Thank you.